Good morning, everyone. Hi, it is Stacy. This is Loving My Veteran. We're walking in my shoes this morning. I'm going to get ready to finish up this series on the truth about PTSD. And today we are going to talk about treatments and treatment options. So this is going to be a great informative thing. We will put links, information on the website and throughout the group over the next week. So you'll be able to access those. But treatment's important to get the right treatment for the right reason. So we want to talk about that. I've got to have some coffee first, and then we will get going. Gotta love coffee. It's one of the greatest things ever. So before we get started in the treatment options, let me just put this out here. We are not recommending, Loving My Veteran is not recommending one treatment over another. We are not doctors. We are here for information purposes. We want to, I've spent hours looking at the little disclaimers and what they say. You need to be aware of what different treatments are. It will help you if your veteran is choosing to do a certain treatment. You'll understand why they are acting the way they do, maybe after a treatment. And also, if they are on any medication, do not abruptly stop any medication without talking to your physician first. Needs to be done. So I'm going to talk about first specifically VA treatments. And this was very interesting to me when I was reading the stuff last night. Also often our veterans go to the VA and they're talking about depression and PTSD and whatever. And the first line that they get all too often is medication. The VA's own website clearly states that medication should only be given after the other forms of therapy, the talk therapies, have been tried first. Okay, so it states that on their prescriber. We actually have prescriber manuals that have been downloaded that we will share links to. So if you want to get into that kind of reading, they're 200 and some pages a piece. But let's talk about the different treatment options that are available, what they are, what they go through, and what their ultimate goal is. So one of the very first ones that the VA uses is called CPT. It is cognitive processing therapy. It is usually done in 12 sessions. Okay? It was originally used on rape victims, and someone decided that, hey, maybe this will work on veterans as well. It focuses on how the traumatic event is constructed and how you cope with it. Now, one of the very first things I was reading this, I was like, ooh, that it says is it works most effectively if it happens immediately after the trauma. And one of the discussions in the own VA provider manual, on page 3, by the way, is that once a veteran experiences a traumatic event, they should immediately start talking about it. I just kind of was like, okay, this is great. So they're watching this happen. They're supposed to say, time out, let me have a timeout so I can go immediately talk about it. What it does, though, and we need to talk about the procedure, is it's repetitive exposure to the traumatic memory in a safe environment. So what they want to do is they want to talk about the exposure over and over and over again in what they call a safe environment. And what they want to do is they want to help them see it differently. And what they use in CPT is their theory is that the trauma created manufactured emotions that may or may not be real. Like if you were attacked, like in a physical fist fight attack, that anger may be your manufactured emotion, but the reality is that you may blame yourself. So that's what they do in CPT. It is repetitive exposure over 12 sessions to the traumatic memory. So that is when they're doing CPT, that is what it is. Then they have CBT, which is cognitive behavior therapy. That is done in 12 to 16 sessions. And it says, emotions are difficult to change directly. CPT targets the emotion by changing thoughts and behavior. It focuses on the relationship among the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. They use relaxing techniques and they give veterans homework. So they actually like write down part of what went on, and then they talk about in detail. Then they talk about how you can relax through it, what you may be able to do to make it less traumatic. So again, they are exposed to the trauma multiple times. Thing about behavior therapies, all behavior therapies, doesn't matter which one we're talking about. When we're talking about cognitive therapies, all cognitive therapies deal with one trauma at a time. So if you've got a veteran who has experienced 6 or 8 traumatic events that have been layered upon layered upon layered, in order to get the PTSD symptoms resolved for each trauma, they've got to do this for each trauma. So make sure you're aware of that. The next one they do is CT, which is cognitive therapy. And it modifies pessimistic evaluations and memories of trauma. And what they're trying to do is they go in to try to change those behaviors or thought patterns. The very first thing you do in CT therapy is you write a comprehensive account of the traumatic event. They want to know every detail of that traumatic event. So that's what happens in CT therapy. PE therapy is prolonged exposure. All right, it's about 15 sessions. They're about 90 minutes long, and they repeat exposure over and over and over again, because their theory in PE therapy is this: that repeated exposure is good because it's the only way you deal with that memory. Otherwise, you put it in a box of avoidance, or you avoid it because you have fear of that memory, and that's what creates the PTSD symptoms. So you describe events in detail and the emotions that go with them. I thought it was great because they use in a lot of these therapies, they use what is like a set of questions that come from Socrates. And they're used in all kinds of therapy, and they are effective in talk therapies. One of them is like, why do you think you feel the way you do? And I laughed. I was like, yeah, he doesn't even know why he feels the way he does. But it is one of the questions that they use. So they go through the PE therapy. The next one, I have a list that I'm like reading the highlighted parts off of here, so you got to give me a sec. The next one they do is EMDR therapy. EMDR therapy, it briefly focuses on the trauma memory, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to change the eye movement. It has to do with the way your eye movement goes, which results is associated reduction of the vividness of the emotion. So what they want to do is, in that therapy, you talk about it in detail in little brief sections of the trauma, and now through eye movement changes, the memory becomes blurry and you don't have the emotions that go with it. And so one of the things that it says in here is that it needs to be done 1 to 2 times a week for 6 to 12 sessions. This is important in EMDR therapy. Okay? It considers the symptoms of PTSD and other disorders unless they are physically or chemically based. So when we talk about that, if they're on medication, EMDR may or may not work. And it is important. This came from the American Psychiatric Association. Okay? It may or may not work. If their signs and symptoms are coming from an exposure issue, such as melphalan, this won't work. So they have to take that into consideration as well when they're doing EMDR. And what it goes, again, it goes on to say that EMDR therapy focuses directly on the memory and is intended to change the way the memory is stored in the brain, which we already talked about. When you have a PTSD memory, that memory is stored in the hippocampus and not where it belongs. It's not filed there. So that's the reason that they get into EMDR therapy. Now we're going to talk about the medications. One of my favorite topics ever. And again, I'm reading it right off of the PTSD.gov website. Not Stacy's version. I did go into and look at, and I've done it 1,000 times, and I encourage all y'all to, is go look at the FDA website. The FDA website is provider signs and symptoms, side effects. It is a big deal. So there are 2 drugs that are currently approved by the FDA to treat PTSD. And they are Zoloft and Paxil. And they have generic names, but those are the 2 drugs that are currently approved by the FDA to treat PTSD. If they are being prescribed anything else, it is called off-labeled. That means they're prescribing it for something it's not needed for. And we see that off-label usage was the new diabetic shot, right? It was a diabetic shot, but they found that one of the side effects, which was great, was weight loss. So they started using this new drug with injections for weight loss, and it was effective and it works. But that is off-label prescribing. So they had to wait until the exact same drug was redone, approved through the FDA, came out with a new name, and now it is approved by the FDA to be used for weight loss. But that's what off-label means. So we have to understand there's a difference between off-label and black box warnings. Black box warnings talk about, or they're put on drugs and medications that have horrific side effects. So you need to make sure that you understand what off-label means, and you need to make sure you understand what black box warnings mean when you go into these things. So what they are, SSRIs, are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. And it has to do with the neurotransmitters in the brain. And they use these drugs to help stop that problem. That's what they're done. Okay? They also are giving Effexor, which is an SNRI, which is a serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor. And when you go back to where I talked about fight or flight, epinephrine, adrenaline, is what creates that overstimulus of the amygdala, and they need that hippocampus to start working to say, hey, this isn't real. And that is when your body reduces norepinephrine. So we understand now why they use this drug. It kind of makes sense that they would use that type of drug. There are other medications, and I'm reading again off of here, being tested for PTSD, but currently the evidence behind them does not show that they are effective. And this came off of their website last night. So this is the most up-to-date information that there is. When you're reading through it and they're talking about the signs and symptoms, even before we get to that, we'll talk about this. If you are taking a medication, okay, it may take a couple of days or weeks for it to become effective. So don't think if you're taking a pill, it's going to be a magic pill that's going to fix it today. Oh, he took his medicine. Are you feeling better? It doesn't work that way. It is a buildup. And the way it is most effective is that the medication must be taken at the same time every day. So you can't take it in the morning and then take it the next night, right? And then take it the next morning. It's got to be on that 24-hour kind of thing the same time. So if you're taking them in the morning, you need to always take them in the morning. If you're taking them at night, you need to always take them at night. Okay? So it is important that you understand that when we're talking about these things. So one of the questions on the website says, is it effective? And it says yes. They're some of the most effective treatments for PTSD. And again, it goes back and it says not all SSRIs or SNRIs are effective for PTSD. So go back again, the FDA 2 approved drugs. 2. It is important that we understand that theory. What are the risks? So it talks about the risk. The mild to moderate side effects such as upset stomach, sweating, headache, dizziness. Some people have sexual side effects such as decreased desire to have sex or difficulty having an orgasm. We've talked about before, hey, hello, my veteran doesn't want to have sex, we don't do it anymore, and they're taking these medications, it's a side effect. The side effects that are not listed on here are increased depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, increase of suicidal thoughts. Some of them create homicidal thoughts. Those are not listed on here. So they're talking about you're going to get an upset stomach, sweating, headaches, dizziness, and the sexual side effects. They're not talking about, nowhere on here does it mention the mental side effects that happen as a result of these medications. That's why you need to go to the FDA's website and look at the prescriber's side effects. A lot of people say, well, I went and I looked at the side effects. Did you go to the drug manufacturer's website or did you go to the FDA's? I mean, like the drug manufacturer is going to be like, hey, take this medicine. It's going to make you feel. There's only certain things they have to. Even the inserts you get in your medication do not have to carry with them all of the stuff that the physician knows, the provider knows. The VA doesn't even have to give you anything. So make sure that you are getting informed information. That's what it's all about here. So one of the things that other things they ask, this is why medication tends to be something that we go to or is a go-to, because if you're experiencing PTSD and you're having horrible memories and horrible reactions, you don't really want to talk about that shit. So these talk therapies and these cognitive talk therapies work in some manner. Sometimes they're phenomenal. Depends. And again, they're all individual. No two people have the same PTSD. No two people have the same emotional regulation. They are individualized treatments. It's about learning what works best for your veteran. And for these talk therapies to work, you got to be honest. So what happens when they're promoting this on their own website again, do I need to go to group or individual therapy? It's one-on-one therapy with your provider who provides the medication. Well, I need to talk in detail about my trauma. Nope. You don't talk about it. You can just say, I'm kind of feeling, be very vague. You get your medicine. Do you have homework like you do in the other ones? Nope. No homework. Just take your medication. How long does treatment last? You'll start to feel better in 4 to 6 weeks. You'll need to continue taking the medicine to continue the benefits. Again, once you go to the FDA website, and I want you to look at the effectiveness of some of these medications. Some of these medications reach their peak effectiveness at 6 weeks. And then it goes down. And there is a very true path. There's a graph that shows that. And it is important that you understand this. So your veteran may go, or the veteran may go, get on this medication, start to feel better. Things are a little better. Now all of a sudden things aren't. And you're 3 months in, because these medications may not have been designed for long-term use. So it is important that you look at the medication, and you look at how long they're effective. It shows, there's graphs that show it all the time. You got to go do your research and pay attention to what's going on. How is it available at the VA? They're staffed with providers who can prescribe antidepressant medications, and choosing the best treatment for you. So you try to figure out which PTSD treatment is best for you. There are videos about them. They're all there. They're treatments that work. And in some cases, because of the signs and symptoms that you're explaining, you may actually get a PTSD medication and a medication for bipolar. And they don't always work together. That's why you've got to go look at the FDA. It's going to counterbalance each other in the way it works. So then in any medication, and I am not just talking about medication, I'm not just talking about medication for PTSD. I'm talking about for any medication. We end up taking medications and we get side effects. We want to medicate normal. Great movie, by the way. We want to medicate normal. We want us to be normal. So anytime you take medications, you get side effects. And so typically we go into the doctor and we complain about the side effects and they give us a pill to fix the side effects. So we are taking medication to treat the side effects of the other medication, and it happens. And not just with PTSD. This happens everywhere. It's not, we're not talking about this in a negative light. We're talking about that this is what happens. So it's important that we understand that as well when we're talking about medications as a whole. Now, these are treatments that are not necessarily on the VA's list. But these are new treatments or different treatments that work as well. They've been reported to work. So I can't tell you because I didn't take them all. I have no idea. Okay? RTM therapy is out there now. It is reconciling of the traumatic memories therapy. Okay? And so what happens is, and we learned this from our perspective class, in any one given second, your body processes about 2 million bytes of data. And they process those 2 million bytes of data. Some of it is stored in your conscious brain, and some of it is stored in your subconscious brain. What is stored in your conscious brain is based upon your past experiences. So a lot of times in a traumatic event, and I will use this very loosely in this, and this is where RTM therapy, NLP therapy, a lot of these other ones go, NLP therapy go. What they do is they have intense emotions that make these very difficult to process, okay? So when you reconcile and you start looking, because you're only seeing what your brain is keeping in its conscious mind. So as you reconcile this stuff going throughout, it lets you reevaluate the traumatic event. And you don't necessarily have to relive it. You reevaluate the traumatic memory and you start to make sense of it. Okay? There's one thing you need to know about all of these treatments. Revisiting the memory too often can cause that memory to be stuck in the hippocampus. And they may relive it over and over and over again. So if you're talking about that same memory 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 times, over and over and over again, are you going to get stuck in that hippocampus? So now you're dealing with fight or flight. So it's important that we understand that. But let's take, for example, how this kind of stuff works is they use it to focus on updating long-term memories. And so they take that original memory that you have that is like, whew. So let's say they're in a vehicle with an IED explosion. And they're now like, hold on, this is all my fault. I did it. I should have done differently. All right, well, what this does is it reteaches them. It reteaches them, you're not the one who put the IED there. And so the mechanics change and the emotion changes, and that's how it works. So there's 4 steps in that, and Again, I will put all this stuff out here. So what do they expect? They visualize images, right? And they don't have to go through that intense feeling. They don't have to go through that intense feeling anymore. And it gets them to start doing it, to start dealing and filing the memory where it was. A lot of our veterans have complained they don't want to do this stuff because they don't want to forget. They don't want to forget, right? They want to remember what happened. They want to remember their buddies. They want to remember that stuff. They just don't want it in their face all the time. So they don't want, the memory won't go away. It's just the way you respond to these memories goes away in some of these treatments. Art is another one, and I'm not talking about painting. It is called accelerated resolution therapy. It is a very unique approach. It guides the client to replace negative images in the mind with positive ones that the client chooses. Okay? So, and here's the key to art. I love this key to art. It is done quick, and it can often be done in one session, 90 minutes. You may have to do 2 or 3, but art is one session. So what it does is, you're in a situation, and again, we'll go back to the buddy and the ID explosion. We get triggered based on the negativity. So now you take the same guy, and instead of focusing on his death, you focus on his life. Okay? It's called accelerated resolution therapy, ART. And Amber, if y'all give me, I am so busy this week. If you give me till Monday, I will put all these links out, and we'll actually put this stuff in the newsletter that will go out. Okay, so we'll put it all out there for you to be able to go in and choose what's best for you. There's also grants that cover a lot of this stuff as well. So what it does is, again, you don't get rid of the bad memory. It's still there. You just don't react to it that way. So instead of, I remember, and I use this as an analogy when I talk about ART therapy, is when my dad died, you know, you mourn and you grieve and you whatever, and then all these people come over and they're visiting and we're getting ready to write the obituary stuff, and instead of grieving, they talk about the good stuff. Okay, so they talk about the good stuff. Do I still grieve my dad? Absolutely. Do I still go through that? Absolutely. But the memories aren't of the day he died. The memories are of his life. And that's what ART therapy helps you do. It's an amazing therapy that goes in. Once the negative images have been replaced with positive ones, the triggers will be gone. Nightmares and repetitive intrusive thoughts can also stop. Again, it is making a huge difference. Stellar ganglion block. And again, we talk about this. These forms of therapy are showing what we've already talked about that has become the thing nobody wants to talk about. These forms of therapy are showing that it is a brain injury, ART, stellar ganglion block, NLP. They're showing that it's a brain injury, right? Because they're dealing with where we're storing it in the brain and how we fix that issue. The key to stellar ganglion block is this. Stellar ganglion block is a procedure where they put a local anesthetic injected into the neck at the stellar ganglion. It is a collection of the sympathetic nerves that locate it, and they help regulate many involuntary functions like heart rate, blood pressure, sweating. It goes in and it sends those neurotransmitters and affects the signal to the brain that says, hello, your amygdala is overstimulated. Let me go in and fix the hippocampus part. Love you, Ben. Let me go in and fix it. Stellar ganglion block is approved by the FDA for pain treatment, but not necessarily for this. But they are using it off-label to do anxiety, depression, PTSD, because it takes that overactive sympathetic nervous system that creates fight or flight, and it brings it back to its baseline. Now here's the key. A lot of people say, well, That's stellar ganglion block and it doesn't work. If your signs and symptoms, if what's going on in your brain is not caused by PTSD, it won't work. If it is caused by melphaquin or a toxicity or something that alters the chemical of the brain through burn pits and other stuff, this isn't going to work. If it is PTSD, it will deal with the PTSD stuff. Okay? It will deal with that. And remember, you can watch this video again and again, so it'll be in there. So it's important that we understand that stellar ganglion block is out there. And then the last thing, oh, there's my little dumb questions that they ask. The last thing we talk about is neurolinguistics programming. And NLP is phenomenal. Not just because I'm a practitioner. I became a practitioner because it was phenomenal. NLP is phenomenal, and it changes the way we view the world. It doesn't change our memory. It doesn't erase anything. It changes the way we view the world by allowing our brain to pull from its subconscious into its conscious state. And so it has nothing to do with like reliving, retriggering. We can actually take negative responses. I've done this successfully with veterans. We can take negative responses just to the world. Like, I get pissed off, or, we'll talk about not the traumatic event. We'll talk about like road rage, or we'll talk about their view of the world. And so we talk about how they form that view of the world. Because how you form that view of the world is going to be the same across the board in every memory you have. Right? Every reaction you have, because it's in your conscious brain. We take that and we take a non-related event and we start pulling from that non-related event emotions and say, wait a minute, but have you ever, tell me something good. And so now we look at the good and say, what made that good? And we're not even going in there like, so now we're getting to focus on good, so we can take bad, and it changes the way we pull the information out of our subconscious. It's already there, and how we use it. And again, that is effective in about 1 to 4 treatments. Very effective. They used it at first responders from 9/11. That's where it was first used in mass to treat PTSD. We're using it, I do it with first responders who are suffering trauma. And the thing that it works with that is, like some of these talk therapies that we mentioned earlier from the VA, they all relate to a specific traumatic event. So if your veterans experience 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 traumatic events, they're going through it 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. If you do some of these other therapies, you're not reliving the event. You're reliving, you're thinking about the way that you respond to negativity or to trauma. That now changes. So the overall comes down across the board. And that's why it works in people like first responders, where they've had a 20-year career of seeing the negative. We can't go in and isolate 20 years of shit. We don't do that. Some of the other stuff that's out there that is phenomenal, THC, cannabis. Again, don't condone, don't not condone. It is all an individual choice. The thing that is done about cannabis is, I'm gonna go out here and just talk like an old person here. I'm gonna know my age. When I was a teenager and we got pot, the only thing we cared about was whether there's stems and seeds in it. Okay, I didn't know that there were strains. I didn't know they all had different properties. I didn't know that you could get derivatives from them. I didn't know there was like Delta 8 and Delta 9 and HHC, and it just goes on and on and on. And CBD and indicas and sativas and all that stuff. I didn't know that. And some of the best research has come out about that, and you can actually customize your cannabis use based on your needs. Whether it's pain or whatever, it can actually be used for that. My veteran uses it religiously. That's probably why we're so happily married, because it replaced the alcohol, and he's functioning, and he's not drunk, and he's not angry. But we met with somebody who really knew what they were doing and talked us through the right derivatives, and we tried it. Um, Hometown Heroes CBD, we have an affiliate agreement with them. Those people are phenomenal, veteran-owned, veteran-based, so they've lived it, done it, and they can talk you through if that is something that interests you. Equine therapy has become a real big help to so many people. It is helping, and the reason that equine therapy, nature, hiking, all that is working is because it does kind of what NLP and some of these other treatments do. It pulls positive in, right, for the first time, positive feelings in. It's pulling them in, and so they don't see the world through the negative glasses all the time. That's why they work. Again, there are tons more out there. I went over the big group, and we could spend a day and a half talking about each one in detail. So I will give you this resource. I might probably actually put it in the comment. Let's see if I can type while I'm talking without messing this up. There's a movie. It's called Wounded Heroes Documentary. I put it actually in there so you can announce it. Wounded Heroes Documentary. It is available on Amazon. It's not horrifically expensive. It is done by Michael Greer. He goes in and he talks about all of these different treatments. They've got therapists, they've got practitioners, they've got people who are doing it. And he talks about some of these different treatment options that are available that are not chemical related. So it is a phenomenal resource. It is not one that triggers veterans. Typically, I know mine's watched it probably 4 times. It is a phenomenal resource, Wounded Heroes Documentary. Michael Greer did an amazing job looking at alternatives. So I want to put that out there. We got to understand the truth about PTSD, the stuff that people don't want to talk about. We need to understand that it's not pretty. We need to understand that it is not a choice. We need to understand that it is actually an injury to the brain. We need to understand that it wreaks havoc in our veterans' lives and anybody who has PTSD's lives. We need to understand that it is isolated brief moments and that it is not a 24/7 thing. That gets a little different, and that treatment's a little different. But a true PTSD reaction is in briefer periods of time. It's not a 24/7, 365-day event. And we need to understand that. We need to understand there are treatment options that are out there. We need to understand that going in and saying, you need to go do EMDR because that's what I heard works. If you don't understand it, you're not going to be able to effectively talk about it. You've got to put it all out there. You've got to lay out pros and cons and have conversations. Why? No therapy works. Zero therapy works if you don't buy in. You've got to be an active participant for therapy or treatment to work. You have to be actively engaged. You've got to support doing it. And if you are doing it just to go through the motions because somebody said you need to, it's not gonna work. Can't tell you how many spouses say they've got their homework and they're supposed to write all of their traumatic event and they haven't done any of it yet. Hello? Maybe they don't want to do it. So it doesn't matter. There are people who have been successful on all of these treatments. All of them. There are people who have successes on all of them. But they have to be committed to doing them. And they have to find the right one for them. I didn't say the right one for us as family and spouses and loved ones. What is right for them? That is how it works. The truth about PTSD is it is an injury. It's time we step up, we recognize it, We see it and we understand that it is a blanket diagnosis for a lot of other possible shit. It becomes the scapegoat, it becomes the blanket diagnosis, and it has a horrible, horrible social stigma. So I just want to put that out there. Next week, we are going to talk about emotions, intimacy, and sex. How emotions, intimacy, and sex, all those things we want, how it works, the truth about all those, the reasons that you don't get what you want sometimes. That is next week. And the following week, we're going to talk about traumatic brain injuries in depth. It's time we get educated. It's time we plug in. I'll give you the stuff. You got to do the work. You got to find what's right for you. Find what's right for you. Y'all have an amazing weekend coming up. Next week's boot camp is on communication. So if you're having issues communicating, that's what boot camp's about next week. If you've taken a communications class with us before, take it again. Those classes are free. They don't charge you for those. They are free. Do take them. Become a part of them. And it's just going to be, I'm so excited. We have so much going on. So we need to get through all that. And again, we have our little donation thing up. While everything is free, we offer is now free. It does cost to make this happen. So I'm going to put a thing out today about, what we put out. What does it cover? If you want to donate to us, what does it cover? Every single person who works on Loving My Veteran is volunteer. Volunteer. What we put into Loving My Veteran is volunteer. If somebody does counseling with me as me as an NLP practitioner, that's different. But what we put out and give to you in Loving My Veteran, not one of us gets compensated for. Not one of us. It is all volunteer. Right now, it is the volunteers who are footing the bills. We need your support so we can continue to grow. We have a retreat. We have classes. We're going to bring in more classes. So it is a big deal. $1, $2, $5, doesn't matter. Every dollar helps us reach that goal. So I'm putting that out there as well. You can do it. PayPal at Loving My Veteran. Hopefully, first of the week, we'll have other options available as well. So I'm going to get off here today. Y'all have a great weekend. I'm talking late, but this was a huge topic. Have a blessed one. I'm Stacy. This has been Walking in My Shoes. We're Loving My Veteran. I love mine today, every day, and always. Be blessed. Bye.